Mass media and social media. Well, let's start with what we mean by media. Mass media is a means for transmitting information from a single source to a vast audience. And the types of mass media that we have and use on a regular basis have evolved over time. So initially, right, media and contact with people is face-to-face. Then we've developed the printing press, and that allows us to reach more people, but still only a small share. Newspapers allow us to reach millions of people, as do radio and television. And the internet links more than half of the world's people. Now, social media is media that allows us to communicate with one another, share information, and form communities, often based on shared interests and goals. And this is multi-directional, so it's not just from one source going out to many. You are able to interact with many other people on social media, and those people are able to interact back with you. And it operates on what we call a platform. It's not centralized, and everybody participating has the ability to send and receive information. Now, one thing that we really want to think about with the media, and this is especially important today, is a concept called media literacy, right? We want to make sure that we understand how the media works and how to assess whether or not it's accurate. So media really shapes the message, and inevitably shapes how people perceive that information. And mass media and social media have really changed the nature of our human relationships. So the media packages information in a certain way. So if you think about, the news, right? The news often, when covering something, especially when covering a crime, right? It'll give us very little information. It's trying to hold on to people's attention. It's trying to grab you and suck you in. And so one thing we have to think about is this a thorough recounting of what has actually happened? Is it an unbiased account? And so we want to learn how to think about the media and the messages we consume critically. Now the media has many critics, right? And not many people, I think, are going to the media expecting that, everything I find here is going to be unbiased. Viewers tend to choose their media outlets based on beliefs they already have. So, for example, news, even our better news that is less biased, still tends to fall on a continuum, right, of leaning right, leaning left. So some people are seeking out news on Fox News because that's going to present the viewpoint that they want to see. And some people are seeking out their news on MSNBC. Now, some critics will tell you that the media has a negativity bias, that when it's selecting stories, it's favoring things with high interest events, and that this can create a culture of fear. And this is certainly true. If you think about how the media covers crime, most of what you would learn about crime from the media is going to be inaccurate and skewed towards the worst but rarest criminal events. So when we think about media literacy, we're talking about that capacity to be a critical consumer of mass and social media. Maybe an easier way to think about having some media literacy is to think about something like clickbait, right? We'll see a headline. We know the story is probably not going to give us more information, and we can kind of tell the headline is clickbaity, but we still often click on it, right? So sometimes someone will want to tell you a story, and they'll tell you teen committed horrible thing, right? And the teen is 19, and yes, technically it's not false. It's a teen, and yes, they did something horrible, but the teen is an adult. Right? And I think most of us, if we saw that headline, would think, a very young person did this. So this begins with our ability to access media and social media, which requires resources, right? So we need to have internet access. We need to have maybe some type of electronics, right? So a cell phone, a laptop, access to the computer. We need some basic literary skills and technical knowledge. We need to be able to look at that and assess it. So media literacy is really involving a couple steps. One is, what is the message being communicated? Two is, what is the source of information? Okay. How does that content compare with other sources on the same topic? What categories of people benefit from any claims being made? And in what ways does the medium shape the information it presents? So our first medium of mass communication is newspapers. The printing press is invented in 1440, and circulation starts increasing dramatically by about 1800. Now, a lot of news early on is very sensational. They're selecting stories and making use of graphic language and images, and they're doing so sometimes to inflame public interest because it sells more papers, right? And so we might think that like, oh, the media has really only been trying to inflame people recently. But if you look back over long periods of time, you can see that there is a history of this. Now, circulation reaches its peak around the end of the 19th century, so late 1800s, and sales start to decline because new types of media are being developed, right? And so most newspapers today, even people who read the news, are probably not getting a hard copy of the newspaper delivered to them. Now, when I was growing up, pretty much everybody got a newspaper, and if you didn't get it delivered, you probably stopped by your local store and got a copy of the newspaper. But people like read the actual newspaper. Today, I think most people read it online. Some of those people will have a digital subscription, and some of them are just reading what's freely available. That means that newspapers have less ad dollars, okay? And that means they have to engage in some cost-saving measures. So that has really impacted journalism. Now, radio is our first ability. We can transmit sound without the use of wires, and it's a huge breakthrough. Early radio is station-to-station communication, sort of more like if you had a walkie-talkie. And the age of radio begins in 1920. We have AM, FM, and shortwave radio. And these are basically energy waves of different varying frequencies. AM sounds a little more crackly usually and is mostly talk radio. We also have satellite radio today. So like if you have Sirius XM, that's satellite radio, and that's using obviously satellites, and that's subscription based, which is where they're making their revenue. So if we look today, how are people consuming audio media, right? We can still see our biggest share of this is AM and FM radio. I can't tell you the last time I listened to the radio. I don't listen to the radio in my car. So the last time I listen to the radio would be if it's playing in a public place or if I'm in someone else's car and they're playing the radio. Our next most popular medium is going to be streaming, right? Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music, things like that. Then people are using music that they actually own. YouTube, satellite radio, podcasts, television music channels, audiobooks, and then other. I mostly listen to podcasts when I'm driving or when I'm in the gym. Now, television increases in popularity in the late 1940s, and by 1950, we have three major networks: ABC, NBC, and CBS, all of which exist today. Today, there's a fourth major network, which is Fox, and then we have cable television as well. And so by 1955, half of all U.S. homes owned at least one television set, right? And today, if you think about it, even if you stream, you probably live in a home that has multiple TV sets. So I live by myself, and there's 3 TV sets in here. So there's one in my living room, there's one in my bedroom, and then I have one that I use like a TV, like a computer monitor in my kitchen that has like a digital calendar on it. But it's actually a TV. So the first presidential campaign that gets televised is between Nixon and Kennedy, and it actually makes a huge impact on that race. Images of the Vietnam War also really help turn the national mood against military conflict. Right? So at this point, it becomes like how telegenic are people starts to play a role. Television has also evolved, right? So there's cable TV. Your parents might still have TV at home. I don't have cable, but I do have Hulu, which has live TV. So I still have all those same channels. HBO is the first cable network to use satellite. In the 1980s, we get VCRs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with VCRs. Don't even tell me because that will break my heart. But those are the predecessors of DVDs. And the typical U.S. adult watches about 5 hours a day. I think if we think about it today, right, this is probably mostly streaming. I've been watching TV before I sat down to record this. I haven't watched anything that's on like live, quote unquote, TV. I've been watching stuff that's streaming. Now, there is an age disparity here, right? The older the person is, the more likely they are that they still have cable, that they haven't cut the cord, and that's how they're accessing things or they're watching TV. And younger people prefer online streaming services. And I would venture to guess most of you are streaming from a device. You're not even necessarily streaming on a TV, probably streaming on a laptop or your phone or your iPad. Okay, so the internet is a gradual development. It starts in the U.S. military, and the term World Wide Web, which is where your www in a web address comes from, the term starts in 1991. First social networking site appears in 1997. You guys are probably not even familiar with early social networking. It's going to be Friendster, and the predecessor of Facebook is something called MySpace, which doesn't exist anymore. Popularity, obviously, of social media remains very high. Now, obviously, having access to social media means there's certain tools you have to have, right? So you have to have, internet or cell phone service, and you have to have a smartphone or a laptop, right? So different people have access to the internet depending on where you live. Where you live might restrict what kind of internet you have access to, right? So in a lot of communist nations and in dictatorships, the media is strongly controlled and people don't have access to the entire internet the way we do here in the US. But about 95% of the world lives somewhere that there is an internet provider. But about half of the world does not use internet. Gender and education obviously plays a part in this as well. We did mention, of course, age and when you were born plays a role in this as well. Even though I would argue my parents' generation, baby boomers, they're moving more towards streaming too. Although my parents don't have any of their own streaming services, they're on all of mine. But when I got rid of cable and went to Hulu Live TV, my parents followed suit. Internet becomes increasingly important during COVID. We talked about that before. So notice you can see how are people accessing media, right? What's the primary way they watch quote unquote TV, right? And that's really going to vary by age. So you notice with younger people, right? 84%, amongst cable TV and satellite users, right? 84% of that is folks that are 65 and older, right? A digital antenna, you guys probably don't even know what this is, right? So there's TV channels you can get over the air for free. So that's what do you call it? Like TV that's free. So like ABC, NBC, CBS, that kind of stuff, right? So TVs used to have an actual antenna on them, like a hard piece of metal that would attract the signal. Okay, you can get a digital antenna today. So there is TV you can get for free. Notice amongst online streaming services, folks 65 plus, right? About 5% are getting their access that way, right? And then you can see if you look at young people's use, right? Young people's use is overwhelmingly online streaming. Hey, my generation is not doing a good job of this either. Okay, and here we can see internet use globally, right? So you look at all the orange countries, 75% of the population is using the internet. I would be willing to bet you guys are using the internet all day, every day. If you guys have an iPhone, you have that terrible feature, right, that shows you your screen time, and sometimes it makes you want to cry. But then you can also see, I see that they have white coded for no internet, but I don't see anywhere that is white besides Antarctica, right? So social media has become a way of life for us now, right? So it's probably hard for you guys to realize this stuff didn't even exist before. And people spend more time engaged with screens than they do sleeping, right? Most people grab their phone kind of as soon as they wake up. They scroll their phone while they're falling asleep. I don't know about you guys, but the pandemic kind of ruined me with my phone and my attention span because I started scrolling while I was doing other things. And that is when I got on TikTok, which is where probably most of my day goes. And now I don't really have the ability to watch TV without also scrolling or doing something else. That's probably how we're all racking up so much screen time on that, screen time feature. My dad also got on TikTok during, during the pandemic. And that's what our group family chat is mostly. My dad, he's a boomer, so he sends a lot of Facebook stuff too. But my dad used to work at the airport, so it's a lot of plane stuff and dog stuff. That's what my dad sends us. Sometimes boats. Although my dad does make an appearance in a TikTok that one of my nieces made. That's pretty funny. And if we have some time to kill one day, ask me about that in class. For about a typical member of society at the present rate we're going, half a lifetime will be spent looking at screens. Now, not all of that is necessarily bad, right? That sounds like, Jesus Christ, what are we doing, right? But I'm working right now and I'm looking at screens. I have 2 screens up, okay? I got a screen I'm recording this on, and I got a screen next to it because I use 2 monitors. I'm on a screen all day at work. I take attendance in class on my phone, right? So we're on our screens a lot, but not all of it is bad for us, right? And while, TikTok has a lot of nonsense on it, it also has a lot of levity and humor that can really be funny and relieve tension and make us feel good. I also learn a lot of fun tips on TikTok. Okay, so how does social media affect you? If you are a psychology major, Dr. Terry Margovic, the psychology program director, does some research on this topic. And so if this is something you want to know more about, how does social media affect people, especially from a psych perspective, I would highly encourage you to touch base with her. Most of you guys have probably had her because she teaches SL 121, Social Justice, Race, and Gender, which I know is required for psych and CJ majors. So because we're online so much, it means how we present ourselves really matters a lot more than maybe it did in the past, or it matters in a different way, right? So we're really able to sort of cultivate a personality online, okay? So my niece has been on TikTok forever, and she has her own TikTok account. And mine was originally hers, but on my phone. And she'll sometimes do silly TikToks with me, but she won't post them on her account. They go on my account because they don't match the aesthetic or the vibe of what she's got going on. I know your generation often does this with Instagram. You have kind of like a vibe or a theme about your Instagram, and then you might also have another Instagram. And I don't mean your Finsta that you hide from the grown-ups in your life. I mean the one that's like your name and then dumps, right? Where you just kind of dump other photos, right? But it doesn't kind of fit your vibe. Things to think about with this, right? It means that we might think we know a lot about people because we're connected to them on social media. And some people are telling us a lot of personal business on social media. But we do have limited information, right? They're controlling what that information is. Sometimes we don't... we could get information about people from other people too. And we have to remember that this is a crafted version. So I had a friend say to me once, probably 10 years ago, she was feeling kind of down in the dumps. She felt like, everyone was in a relationship except her. And she told me how everyone is doing this and everyone's doing that. And I was like, well, how do you know that? And she said, well, I see it on Facebook. And I was like, sweetheart, Facebook isn't real. People are not posting their worst moments on Facebook, right? We're posting happy moments. And I haven't posted to Facebook in probably 6-7 years, but I do post on Instagram. But yeah, it's fun things, like pictures at the beach, pictures from somebody's graduation, right? It's not like me at home in a depression spiral, me at home in my house looking disgusting with the house a mess. So we're able to fashion an identity for ourselves. We create a profile, we update our status, we present an ideal version of ourselves, right? So we're not posting the pictures generally that people took of us where we look awful. In fact, we often get mad at our friends when they post something and we're like, hey, I look terrible in that picture. And so part of our sense of ourself gets built by imagining how other people see us. And social media can provide a steady feedback on that. Now, sometimes social media can be a great place. People are like, girl, your outfit is fire. You look great, right? I've seen a lot of young people really hype each other up, and I love that. That's fantastic. But sometimes people are trolls, and they're just downright mean and nasty on social media. And they can really present negative feedback for you. Or you can look at other people, look at how they've presented themselves and feel like you don't measure up. Now, again, this is a field where there's quite a bit of research on social media, and we do know that social media seems to be correlated with, doesn't mean it causes it, means correlated with rates of anxiety, loneliness, depression, and self-harm. So one thing to remember is correlated means things move together and change together, but it doesn't mean one thing causes the other. So for some people, social media can be a really positive experience. And for some people, social media can be a bullying experience and really harmful for them. We also see a lot of trends, right? So there's like phrases you'll hear people say that that you got on like TikTok. Like right now, as I record this, it's the whole like, it's very demure, it's very mindful trend on TikTok, or dance trends on TikTok. Effects of social media are more pronounced with girls than with boys. And so certainly I think it's easy to see how too much social media can be really harmful. Online interactions are really replacing face-to-face. So your generation has grown up different than mine. And now I feel like an 80-year-old grandma giving you guys a lesson about how different it was back in my day. But there's skills your generation doesn't have because of the way you interact with people, right? So you do a lot more texting, you do a lot more FaceTiming, you do a lot more like messaging through Snapchat and things like that. When I was a kid, you had to call someone's house and their mom answered the phone and you had to say like, hi, Mrs. Smith, can I please speak to Sally, right? I think this is part of why your generation gets super nervous and anxious about having to make phone calls, right? So my niece will gladly order food if there's an online app for it. But if we have to call, then I have to make the phone call. Also, the less face-to-face talk we have, we can really lose capacity for empathy. It's super easy when we're just like chatting back and forth for tone and all of those pieces to be missing. Things like that. Also, all of this means that like our faces are in our phones a lot, right? And so kind of if we're out and about with other people, we're out to dinner, as soon as we get bored, sometimes like we go to grab our phone, right? Which I get. This is something I've been guilty of. I had a friend point out to me, oh, I can tell when you're totally not interested because here's what you do. And she's a psychologist, and I was like, please use your psychology elsewhere. But it's true. So I try to be more mindful now. Like if we go out to dinner, like put my phone down, kind of be present with people. But it's super easy for people to spend time together and everyone's just on their phone scrolling. Social media can be really powerful in terms of conformity as well. We might feel like, oh, the current trend or the way I'm supposed to be is what I see online, and might feel a need to conform to that. And that's obviously going to be most impactful on younger people. Now, your book is saying that social media can enhance our ability to multitask, but all the research says we can't multitask. Even if you think you're good at multitasking, you're really not. I will say, enjoy your ability to do it to some degree while you're young, because it's going to go away. You're not going to be able to multitask as well. But that's engaging in more than one mental or physical activity at a given time. But often it does reduce our attention span, and it often means we're not paying good attention to the things we are doing. Now, as I mentioned, one of the drawbacks of social media is that we can really use it to bully people, right? And so cyberbullying is the use of the internet to embarrass, abuse, manipulate someone. About 41% of US adults have experienced it. If you've ever looked at the comments page on somebody who's famous or maybe like an influencer online, you can see that people can get really nasty. I don't know if you guys remember this. We just had the Olympics, but in the previous Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics, right, Simone Biles got what gymnasts call the twisties, and she decided to pull out of competition. Now, this is something that's really harmful mental health-wise and physically, could put her in serious danger. But people were online being like, how do you go to the Olympics and then bail? This go round, people were like criticizing her hair because like she's got some flyaways and some wispies. Well, she's jumping in the air and spinning around like crazy. Of course her hair isn't perfect. When we look at people between 13 and 17, nearly 60% have been victims of cyberbullying. And some of this can take the form of, inappropriate rumors, right? Things that are really nasty. And things like, revenge porn or sharing explicit images. Now, our newer area has to do with, can people become addicted to social media? And it looks like this may be true to some degree. Social media is connected to the pleasure center of the brain. That ding, that comment, that message you get does produce a dopamine hit for you. And by the way, the people who create and invent social media have done a lot of research on what will keep you on their platform and on their pages. For the majority of users, social media does not become addictive. But obviously for some people it can be problematic. We actually already talked about this. So how does social media affect relationships? Well, one thing that I think scares the crap out of parents is who are their kids talking to and meeting online? Are they getting in touch with predators? So one thing to think about as adults as well, but as young people, is not having don't have an open public profile, okay? Even if you're posting things that should be fine, it shouldn't be problematic. Here's you at the beach with your friends. Unfortunately, if you have those images open to the public, there are people who are going to share those. That includes images of your children that might be in bathing suits too. And while most of us would look at those and just think, oh, cute kids having a good time at the beach, for some people, they look at those images and they think of them in a sexual way. It also, though, means we are also able to monitor people a little bit more, right? So there's software your parents can put on your phone or on your computer and see where you've been on the internet. They can block access to certain things. I guess maybe this is a feature of social media because Snapchat has a map, right? And I'm not sure if Life 360 is considered that, but we can track people too, right? And in some ways, this is like super nice and super safe. I have a few friends whose location I can see, actually for that very reason of like, what if something happens to them? And I can see some of my nieces and I can see my dad's, because when that feature first came out, my dad was like, what is this? So me and my niece shared ours with my dad and he shared his back, right? And sometimes it's fun to look and see, where are your friends? What are they doing today? Ooh, they're shopping. I hope they're getting something cute, right? It also means your parents can kind of keep a closer eye on you, but it also means people can keep a closer eye on you. Sometimes with social media, parents are oversharing. You guys are probably just coming out of, or maybe still in a period like this. So when my niece was little, I just kind of freely posted stuff online. And as she's, a junior in high school right now, and she's still down for the silly, goofy ass pictures, but she'll be like, please don't put that on the internet, which is understandable, right? If I was like too bad and I was posting embarrassing pictures of her, like that could really damage our relationship, right? Nobody really likes that. I mean, my mom's done that a couple times, taken a picture where I was like, why is this on Facebook? In terms of dating and relationships, so many more relationships begin online now. I think for my generation, even though they have also engaged in online dating, people are a little more scared of it and a little more cautious about the safety issues. The use of dating sites is highest amongst young people. Amongst married people, people who meet online end up marrying. Among married couples, people who met online end up marrying more quickly. Couples who meet online are 5 times more likely to get divorced. That seems like a contradictory statement, right? Well, how does social media affect those romantic relationships, right? This might be how you meet people, but this can be concerning in relationships as well. So I grew up with someone who, got on Facebook when Facebook first opened up outside of colleges. His wife reconnected with someone from high school, and then they really reconnected, and that was the end of their marriage. Now, is Facebook to blame for that? No. But these can be really difficult things, right? It can become really easy. It can become a source of conflict in your relationship. Is your significant other liking thirst traps on Instagram or wherever you young people like your thirst traps? Right? And it can create a lot of problems. So it can create conflict. Okay, social media becomes a huge agent of socialization, right? There's so much we learn on there. Online violence can really numb us to the effect of violence. There's so much stuff you can see and have access to that you haven't in the past, right? So Gypsy Rose is in the news a lot because she got released on parole recently, right? And I guess maybe a couple weeks ago on TikTok, people were like, ooh, crime scene photos. Now, those crime scene photos were available a while ago, right? But we do have the means to share information and things that in the past might have been harder for us to see. And maybe are things we shouldn't see. Also, social media allows us to transmit and perpetuate inequality and stereotypes. So some people feel like social media is pretty shallow, and it's certainly not an in-depth look at anybody, but it can also transmit important information, right? So when you think about some of the hashtag movements, right, like Black Lives Matters or Me Too, people were disclosing information on the internet, right? And this allowed people to connect and share information. It's also really reshaped work. It helps people find employment, right? So people use LinkedIn for that purpose. You might see somebody post a job. Somebody might post like, hey, my work is hiring. Your employers might be using it to look at you too. So again, make your account private. Do not friend your boss. This is not actually a good idea. People are using social media while they're at work. And then some jobs require it, right? So, you might work for an agency where that's your whole job is managing their social media. Obviously, political campaigns happen online as well, right? So during the 2020 campaign, Trump had many more Twitter followers than Biden did. So it can be something that's really helpful. It can really help you get your message out there, but it can also be harmful. And can really intensify things. All right, so let's come back to our theories and let's see what they have to say about media. So the structural functional perspective was talk about how does mass media and social media help society, right? Or what's the function it serves? So it helps socialize us and it does advance a uniform culture. So one thing that happened on social media very recently, 2024 Olympics just ended, and there was a lot of really positive and lovely posts on what I would call Olympic TikTok. So first of all, Snoop Dogg has just become like the mascot for the United States. And I don't know when we voted on that, but I love it. His content is so wholesome. You see him at the Olympics. He's got a t-shirt that's got Simone Biles' face on it. Flava Flav decides to sponsor the women's water polo team when he finds out that these women are working multiple jobs while trying to train for the Olympics. The gymnasts posting, first of all, they're funny as hell. And then they're posting and supporting each other. And there was a lot of like really positive stuff on the internet, which I loved. Can increase social integration. It also acts as an agent of social control, right? So none of us want to be embarrassed or look stupid or do the wrong thing. It's a source of entertainment and stability. One of my favorite things on TikToks is little kids saying fresh words, right? And their cute little squeaky voices is one of my favorite things. Probably my current favorite thing on TikTok is that Can I Pet That Dog? And I love it when it's, a bear. Now, some criticisms of this perspective. Media does contribute to the operation of society, but not all those consequences are positive. It also is going to focus on really broad macro level patterns, right? So if you really want to understand the inner workings of some type of crime, you're not going to get that, in a 60-second news piece, and you're not going to get it in a 60-second TikTok. Now, symbolic interaction talks about how we engage in social construction of reality. And this is absolutely true of the media, right? The media is shaping how they tell you a story. And we can use social media to shape what we tell people about ourselves. But that perspective doesn't really tell us how does the broader society play a role in that. Now, social conflict theory says that we have this illusion that there's unlimited choice, but we're still getting limited perspectives online. Media consolidation is a trend by which an increasing share of the mass media is owned and controlled by a small number of individuals. So while there's many radio stations, most of them are owned by a few large corporations. Okay. Now, media choices have been increasing, right? One of the things that's nice about like streaming, right, is that you can find your niche little projects and things can get made because there is enough of an audience when it streams, right? So media choices have increased. And one thing to think about is that class is not the only dimension of social inequality, right? We want to think about other dimensions of that as well. And now, along with this conflict, looking at this from a feminist perspective, right? Media supports generally the idea that women are less than and men are more. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Bechdel test, right? But it's a test about how represented women are in film. People talk about it with TV and other things too. But it's basically like, look at a movie and is there at least one scene in which two women have a conversation about something other than a man? You'd be surprised how many movies relegate women to just whatever the love story is. So advertising tends to carry a male bias. But mass media does play a role in reducing gender inequality, and social media has helped play a role in that as well, right? So again, one of the cool things that we got to see with the Olympics this year is, first of all, our women's team is incredibly diverse, right? So one white woman on the team and the rest are women of color. And so we get to see these women as total badasses and being celebrated, and they're diverse women. And we get to see that and take pride in that as a country. Now, as every one of our chapters does, it ends with the politics of social media. So majority probably of U.S. adults feel like, the media has a negative effect on our way of life. Young people who tend to be more politically liberal are more positive in their assessment. So both sides, both liberal and conservatives, do agree that it presents misinformation and encourages polarization, but each side probably really feels like it's misinformation on the other side. Conservatives are much more likely to say social media has a political bias. Overall, though, social media is a progressive force in U.S. politics.